Joining us now is WBZ's Jon Keller. And Jon, this decision, like we said, undoes nearly 50 years of precedent. This is going to have big ramifications for millions of women. Your initial reaction, and then what do you expect to see happen now across the country? We know that multiple states already have trigger laws in place that immediately ban abortion as soon as this ruling came down.
Right, Breana, including here in Massachusetts, where probably very little will change, but as nearby as New Hampshire, a much more purple state, and certainly around the country, you're going to see some dramatic changes. There's no question about it. Now, as far as the political consequences of all of this, I think that's a very mixed bag. While nationally, more than 60% of Americans say they didn't want Roe v. Wade overturned, as the court has now done, that number drops to just over 50% when they're asked whether or not they oppose having the states decide the matter, which is now what's going to happen. And when you ask other questions about abortion, about, for instance, late-term abortions, or whether parental consent should be required for abortion, there is significantly less public support. So the politics of this are divided, they're cloudy. We're heading into a midterm election this fall, not a national election for the presidency. So that further fragments the political outlook. There's no question this is going to be a factor, and certainly abortion rights advocates and activists are going to be very much aroused to push back on this through the political process. But what the implications of that are is very much of a work in progress, Breana.
Well, Jon, the ruling came more than a month after the stunning leak of the draft opinion by Justice Samuel Alito. So we've had some time. We suspected that this was coming. Why do you think that the justices came to this decision? It was Justice Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. And Chief Justice John Roberts delivered the concurring opinion. So why do you think the justices came to this opinion?
Well, look, if you read through the decision, the majority decision, as I have, there's a very specific legal argument for why Roe v. Wade and the Casey case, which later reaffirmed the basic grounding of Roe, were of dubious constitutional merit. I'm not a lawyer, Breana, nor do I play one on TV, so you're going to need a legal analyst to sort through all of that part of it. But as a political matter, this has been a bedrock cause of American conservatism ever since Roe v. Wade passed back in 1973 to overturn this. Even here in Massachusetts, which is an overwhelmingly pro-choice state, the pro-life segment of the vote, we're also a very Catholic state, and while a majority of Catholics do support abortion rights, there's a lot of issues that become intertwined there. Even here in Massachusetts, anti-choice sentiment has been and continues to be a political factor, not a majority political factor, perhaps not an overwhelming one, but a significant one. It is interesting, if you want to take some time and read through the different rulings that were handed down today. As you noted, Chief Justice Roberts concurred with the view of the majority that Roe was unconstitutional, but he scolded the majority for, to paraphrase what he says, going too far in their ruling. He argues that there was nothing in the plaintiff's initial arguments here that required the court to go as far as they did in basically wiping out the entirety of the Roe protections, to the point where states can now pass laws that require the pregnancy to come to term, whether it's the product of rape or incest, or whether the fetus is carrying a fatal disease. So to call the ruling radical That's a word that's tossed around awfully loosely in our political culture these days, Breana. But I think in this case, even Chief Justice Roberts is saying it applies.
Oh, Jon, protests are underway outside the Supreme Court at this very moment. We saw large groups of people rallying, some of them happy, some of them obviously very upset. It is such a divisive issue. There are events planned in Boston today, including at the State House in Copley Square. And as you mentioned, Massachusetts has laws in place to protect abortion. But what do you think are maybe some of the other ways that our state will be impacted? Is it maybe the strain on health care? Do people travel here? What are some of the ways that you see our state being impacted by this decision?
Well, you just mentioned one, that we might become a destination for refugees, if you will, from other states seeking legal abortion services. Let me put it this way. Public opinion does matter in our country still. You just saw this in the last 24 hours when Republicans in the Senate who've been resisting any changes in our gun laws for many, many years, they obviously looked at the polling in the wake of the Uvalde school massacre and decided that, oh man, we better do something. We can't be obstructionists this time around. This is bad. And so they acted. And you saw this seemingly irreconcilable partisan gridlock over this issue in the U.S. Senate, at least for the moment, at least in this relatively modest set of reforms, you saw that collapse. So public opinion on abortion rights is going to have an impact, perhaps not on the court, but keep in mind, the reason why we have this ruling today is because of politics. Because enough voters in 2016 decided that they didn't like Hillary Clinton, the Democratic Party was not satisfying their ideology or their political agenda. They preferred to waste their vote on some third-party candidate or to stay home and sit it out altogether. Those voters and those decisions that they made led to the election of Donald J. Trump. And Donald J. Trump appointed the 3 arch-conservative justices who produced this ruling today. So, bottom line, your voice matters, but more to the point, your vote does matter. Very much so, and you're seeing that in graphic display today.